Imagine going to a pharmacy for a simple blood test. Just one tiny finger prick. No needles, no vials, no waiting days for results. Now imagine that test tells you that you might have cancer or a life-threatening condition. You panic. You call your family. You rush to a hospital. Then you discover the result was wrong. This wasn't a movie plot. It happened. Behind those tests was a Silicon Valley startup once valued at $9 billion. Its founder was celebrated as the next Steve Jobs. A future president praised her lab. Billionaires trusted her. Some of the most powerful people in America invested hundreds of millions of dollars without fully verifying the technology. But behind the black turtlenecks, inspirational speeches, and magazine covers was one of the biggest corporate frauds in modern history. This is the rise and spectacular fall of Theranos. This is Scam Vault. In 2003, a 19-year-old Stanford student named Elizabeth Holmes had an idea that sounded almost impossible. She believed blood testing could be revolutionized. Instead of drawing multiple tubes of blood from a vein, doctors would only need a few drops from a finger prick. Those tiny samples, she claimed, could run hundreds of laboratory tests. It sounded faster, cheaper, less painful, and if it worked, it could change medicine forever. Holmes dropped out of Stanford and founded a company called Real-Time Cures. Soon, it became Theranos. The timing couldn't have been better. Silicon Valley was obsessed with founders who wanted to change the world. Investors weren't just buying products anymore. They were buying visions, and Elizabeth Holmes knew how to sell one. She spoke about democratizing healthcare, about saving lives, about making blood testing available to everyone. She rarely revealed technical details. Instead, she talked about the future. People listened. Money started pouring in. By 2004, Theranos had already raised millions of dollars. Over the following years, the company attracted increasingly powerful supporters. Former government officials joined the board. Military leaders joined too. Big names added credibility. To outsiders, it looked like the smartest people in America believed in Theranos. In 2015, Vice President Joe Biden toured the company's lab in person. He walked past rows of futuristic-looking machines and called it the laboratory of the future. What he didn't know, the demonstration had been staged. That belief became contagious. By 2010, Theranos had reached a valuation of $1 billion. Then came even bigger announcements. The company partnered with Walgreens. Customers would soon be able to walk into neighborhood pharmacies and receive advanced blood tests with only a finger prick. The promise was revolutionary. Media outlets couldn't get enough. Elizabeth Holmes appeared on magazine covers. She was compared to Steve Jobs because of her black turtlenecks and minimalist presentations. She became the youngest self-made female billionaire according to Forbes. The world saw a visionary. Almost nobody saw the warning signs. Behind closed doors, Theranos operated with extreme secrecy. Employees were divided into isolated teams. Many didn't know what other departments were doing. Strict confidentiality agreements discouraged people from asking questions. Former employees later described an environment where fear replaced collaboration. In science, breakthroughs are normally backed by published research. Independent experts test the claims. Other scientists attempt to reproduce the results. Theranos did almost none of that. Despite making extraordinary promises, the company released very little peer-reviewed evidence proving its technology actually worked. So why did almost no one ask to see the real data? But success has a way of silencing skepticism. Investors saw famous names on the board. Partners saw billion-dollar valuations. The media saw an inspiring founder. Everyone assumed someone else had already verified the science. Meanwhile, inside the company, reality looked very different. The device that was supposed to perform hundreds of blood tests struggled to deliver accurate results. Quality control problems kept appearing. Some tests failed internal checks repeatedly. Instead of relying on its own machines, Theranos reportedly performed many patient tests using traditional commercial laboratory analyzers. In some cases, small blood samples were diluted so they could be processed by conventional equipment, a practice that could affect accuracy for certain tests. Patients had no idea. Partners had no idea. Many investors had no idea. The public story and the internal reality were becoming two completely different worlds. And it wouldn't stay hidden forever. Because somewhere outside Theranos, a handful of former employees had decided they could no longer stay silent. Their voices would soon reach a journalist willing to ask the questions that almost nobody else dared to ask. And once those questions were asked, the billion-dollar illusion would begin to crumble. In early 2015, an experienced investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal received a tip. The source claimed something was seriously wrong inside Theranos. His name was John Carreyrou. At first, the story sounded almost unbelievable. How could one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated companies be hiding a secret this big? But instead of dismissing the tip, Carreyrou started digging. One source became several. Then several became more than a dozen. Former employees began describing the same disturbing pattern. The technology didn't work as advertised. Machines frequently failed. Test results were inconsistent. And anyone who questioned the company risked intimidation or losing their job. Carreyrou didn't rely on rumors. He reviewed internal documents, lab reports, emails, regulatory records. He spoke with doctors, laboratory professionals, and industry experts. Every new piece of evidence pointed in the same direction. The revolutionary machine that Theranos promoted wasn't handling most patient tests. Instead, many tests were being run on traditional commercial analyzers already used by conventional laboratories. The company's greatest innovation wasn't changing medicine, it was changing the story. Theranos fought back hard. The company denied every allegation. Its lawyers sent aggressive legal threats. Executives attempted to stop former employees from speaking. They even tried to pressure the Wall Street Journal into abandoning the investigation. But the reporting continued. Then came October 15, 2015. The first article was published. Its impact was immediate. The story revealed that Theranos had struggled with its blood testing technology and had relied heavily on conventional machines for many tests. The image of the unstoppable startup cracked overnight. Suddenly, regulators started asking questions. Scientists asked tougher questions. Investors asked questions they should have asked years earlier. Government inspections soon uncovered even more troubling problems. Federal inspectors reported serious deficiencies in laboratory practices. They warned that conditions at one Theranos laboratory posed immediate risks to patient health and safety. Then came another devastating blow. Patients who trusted the company's tests began sharing their stories. Some had received alarming results that later turned out to be wrong. People had experienced unnecessary fear, additional medical appointments, repeated blood draws. In some cases, treatment decisions were affected by unreliable results. Healthcare depends on trust. Once patients lose confidence in their test results, that trust is incredibly difficult to rebuild. The company's partnerships also began to collapse. Walgreens, once one of Theranos' biggest supporters, ended its relationship with the startup. Lawsuits followed. Investors who had once praised Elizabeth Holmes now claimed they had been misled. The valuation that had climbed to $9 billion started falling apart. Inside the company, employees watched years of secrecy unravel in public. The dream that promised to transform healthcare had become a crisis. Regulators tightened their grip. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services barred Theranos from owning or operating a blood testing laboratory for 2 years. The pressure kept building. Then, in March 2018, another major bombshell landed. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, and Sunny Balwani with massive securities fraud. According to the SEC, investors had been misled about the company's technology, finances, and business performance. Holmes agreed to a settlement with the SEC without admitting or denying the allegations. She gave up voting control of the company, paid a financial penalty, and accepted restrictions on serving as an officer or director of a public company. But the legal battle was far from over. Just a few months later, federal prosecutors announced criminal charges. Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. The case had moved beyond business failure. Now, it was about alleged criminal deception. By September 2018, there was little left to save. Theranos officially dissolved. The company that had once promised to reinvent medicine disappeared. The laboratories closed. Employees moved on. Billions of dollars in value vanished. What remained was one question. How had so many intelligent people believed a story that was never fully proven? The answer would unfold inside a federal courtroom. In September 2021, nearly 18 years after Theranos was founded, Elizabeth Holmes walked into a federal courtroom. The woman once celebrated as the future of medicine was now fighting for her freedom. Prosecutors argued that this wasn't simply a startup that failed. Startups fail all the time. They said this was different. According to the government, Holmes knowingly misled investors about what Theranos could actually do. They presented emails, investor presentations, financial documents, and testimony from former employees and business partners. Together, they painted a picture of a company that sold confidence while hiding critical problems. Holmes took the witness stand in her own defense. She insisted she had believed in the technology. She denied intending to deceive anyone. She also claimed that Sunny Balwani, Theranos' former president and chief operating officer, had controlled many aspects of the company and had emotionally abused her during their relationship. Balwani denied those allegations. Because of those differing circumstances, his criminal trial was held separately. After months of testimony, the jury reached its decision. On January 3, 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts related to defrauding investors. She was acquitted on several patient-related charges, and the jury could not reach unanimous verdicts on a few remaining counts. It wasn't a complete victory for either side, but it was enough. The entrepreneur once worth billions was now a convicted felon. Months later, on November 18, 2022, the judge announced her sentence: 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Sunny Balwani faced his own trial. In July 2022, he was convicted on all 12 counts brought against him. Later that year, he received an even longer sentence of nearly 13 years in federal prison. The company that once claimed it would transform healthcare no longer existed. Its offices were empty. Its laboratories were closed. Its revolutionary machines had become symbols of broken promises. Investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars. The company had raised roughly $1.3 billion over its lifetime. Patients lost something even more valuable: trust. Some received inaccurate results. Others endured unnecessary fear and additional medical procedures. The damage reached far beyond Silicon Valley. It raised difficult questions about the relationship between innovation and accountability. How did so many experienced investors and so many respected public figures miss every one of these warning signs? The truth is uncomfortable. Reputation can be persuasive. Confidence can be persuasive. A compelling story can be persuasive. But none of those things can replace proof. Theranos became a cautionary tale because the warning signs were there: extreme secrecy, little independent validation, a board filled with famous names but limited laboratory expertise, employees afraid to speak, technology that couldn't withstand outside scrutiny. Individually, each warning sign might have seemed explainable. Together, they told a very different story. The scandal also highlighted the importance of investigative journalism. Without whistleblowers willing to risk their careers, without reporters willing to verify every claim, without regulators eventually stepping in, the truth might have stayed hidden much longer. Medicine is built on evidence. Science depends on transparency. And trust must be earned, not manufactured. Theranos promised to replace the needle with a single drop. In the end, all it replaced was the truth, for a while. Because for years, the biggest lie in Silicon Valley wasn't the blood test. It was the room full of powerful people who never once asked to see it actually work. This has been Scam Vault. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe for more deep dives into the world's biggest scams, corporate frauds, and financial deceptions. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable stories are completely true.